Good afternoon and welcome to the Summit Masterclass on how to stand out through branding and design like Simply Fresh, kindly sponsored by EKW Group. In a moment, we'll hear from Devinder Jeeta, Creative Director at Simply Fresh, who will share his expertise. He will then be joined by Scott Graham, owner of McLeish of Inverary, and Jason Miller, Client Director at EKW Group. That montage is just a small amount of some of the fantastic branding and design elements I've seen in my years at ACS visiting stores across the world. Branding and design comes into all aspects of the store, from what's on the outside to what's on the inside, what's on the shelf and what colleagues wear. So how do you decide what goes where? How do you decide what's right for your store and make sure that what you're giving your customer is exactly what they want? How do you get your store to be as outstanding as some of the ones that we all know and love? In the first instance, you ask an expert, which is why I have invited Devinder Jeeta, Creative Director at Simply Fresh, to share his expertise.
Thanks, Sarah. And the ACS for having me and Simply Fresh at this event. I think now more than ever, it's true that convenience stores are lifestyle partners. So it's the perfect time to build relationships. So I was asked to speak about how to stand out through design and branding, and in particular for convenience stores, right? So I don't want to make this about design and branding in a broad sense, but specifically channeling into convenience in the sector that we're in. And essentially, what is branding, right? Branding essentially is storytelling, and I think design is a facet in this particular conversation of the brand that we're looking to create. And I'll run you through how we tell this story, and how a brand like Simply Fresh has been successful in capturing customers, and also how retailers have found that it resonates with their beliefs and why they choose to trade with Simply Fresh. But equally, I think this is important for any independent retailer, that's trying to keep customers, which I think is really important, and also win new ones, right? And show what their story is all about. So I think five elements, right? So I call this Simply Fresh's Power of Five, and how we talk about branding within stores. So I'll run through them: clarity, product, consistency, experience, and connectivity. And they're very important all the way through. But if you start with clarity, that's your sort of first opportunity to talk to your prospective customers and give them the messaging that you want in the most concise form possible for them to digest it very quickly. And then you run all the way through to the connectivity. We're talking about a lasting impression. So there's a first impression and a lasting impression and a continuation of the story that you want to tell them. And I think these are the kind of messages that we have tried to put through our story, our brand, and the identity that we're looking to create within these stores is embodied through these facets. And one of the main things about Simply Fresh and branding in general is consistency, right? So how you deliver on this message, on this story, all the way through the interaction that your customer has with it. And I've always found that in consistency comes truth, and in truth becomes a much more believable story for your prospective customers. And it's that we're looking for them to buy into. So if you don't have the consistency, I think you lose your identity. So I've always been of the impression that all the touch points should be back to the brand, right? And retail stores are very touchy-feely. And I'd like to run through how we start the story and how we run through all the chapters, as it were. And I think the other thing to touch on as well before we move forward is that it's really important to remember that there's things going on in your customer's head when they choose to either enter your store and when they choose to buy things from your store. So we know this sort of rational versus emotional response for purchasing, but I think also it's not about just appealing to one, it's about appealing to both. This is a very unique set of circumstances for any individual, and they buy based on one of these two things, but you're not to know which one it is. You've no idea, right? So you have to be appealing to both of them with the view that they will adopt one of them when they enter your store, if they choose to enter your store. So choosing to enter is a really big part. And the signage is the embodiment of your identity. So it's your first opportunity to leave a memorable impression. So let's not forget that walking past your store is just as important as walking in, because walking in maybe is your chance to keep the customers, and walking past is your chance to win them, right? So how do you talk to those guys? How do you get them to understand what you're about? And when you don't benefit from a multi-million-pound marketing budget to sort of talk to customers on a level that potentially independent retailers aren't always able to do, I think the store fascia just becomes more important, and it's really clear that we have to deliver our story right from the front cover, right? That you've heard that never judge a book from its front cover, but I can assure you that most customers will judge a store from its fascia and its appeal on the street. So typically Simply Fresh stores, and the way I've tried to put stores together in the past is when we first came into this industry, was to remove as much livery and store images that we possibly could from the windows, with the view that the identity that we were creating inside the stores would be best viewed through the windows, and we will break down barriers. But I'm also aware that due to sizes of stores and particular locations, that you do often have to have some imagery. So there's nothing better than open windows. But I think the next best thing is aspirational photography. And here what you can see is that we've looked to showcase what kind of product you'll get in your store, and equally what you can do with that product. And also the abundance in fresh, which is what we'd expect to see in a Simply Fresh store. And Simply Fresh stores, by definition, are exactly that. It's a simple shopping experience based on fresh product and fresh food. There's clear messaging on the windows to tell you what you can find in the store. There's open hours, etc. And also, I think it's very important to establish a collaboration for independent retailers. So if you are aligned to a larger brand, in this case Sainsbury's, then let's get that on the window and benefit from a cumulative brand strength, which is unattainable for just an independent. So I think it's really important to showcase that, but also never losing sight of the story that you're trying to tell yourself as an independent. Inside, I think consistency is absolutely paramount. So I think you need to have your identity influence all the signage and the merchandising, and everything should be consistent. And when I say everything, I mean everything from the staff uniform to your shelving units and the way they're being put in. So you could see, if I go back, our fascias have timber on them. Some of the imagery has timber on the bottom, and when you come in store, you expect to also see more timber. And the timber is being used through Simply Fresh all the way through, purely as a way to reinforce that integrity message. You can see there's no packaging on this particular product as well. So again, that reinforces that, right? This is humble product and honest and showcasing its best. The stores typically have base color palettes. And we should understand that we work in an industry, we're looking to sell products, and all the great products on our shelves, there's some great marketing execs that are working in these teams that have huge budgets to make their products stand out on your shelves. So let them do that by paring down the clutter in your store, having dedicated displays, and showcasing the products at its best. So once they're in the store, you want to communicate with them in a way that's, again, reinforcing your identity and getting them to go through your store. So I've just a sort of selection of kind of images here. Store messaging that you'd expect to see, outside our store on the left-hand side and telling you the categories that you'd expect to find, the kind of materials that we use to reinforce messaging, so canvas from the market and bread and cake, so there's a consistency in font type, there's a consistency in material type. You can see some of the privet on the bottom right-hand corner, and we have some birch ply lettering there, milk and dairy category signage. Again, we reinforce the fresh message with this green sort of hedging across the bulkheads in our stores, and that is a key signifier through material rather than through messaging. So eventually, those customers that you are looking to keep and those become habitual shoppers don't need to look through the broader scope of their vision. The narrow scope of the vision. They can look through the broader scope of the vision and just identify categories by material choice. And then if you've got something in particular that you want to shout about, then do that, right? So from sea to store, there's some great products on that shelf. So why not tell customers that that's there in more succinct messaging? So the key here is that consistency, to keep your identity running through your store, and making sure that you are delivering on that message that you put on the front of your store. So I think the point that I want to make here is that I go into a lot of independent stores and I see some great handwritten signs, but equally I think it's fair to say that I see some really poor handwritten signs. And I think expectation levels for customers today are much higher, even for convenience stores, because we've been doing such a good job, right, over the last few years as an industry. So the expectation's gone up, and therefore I think that we need to deliver on that. So if you have an individual that works in your store that has a really good handwriting and will often do that for you, then do it, but make it consistent and make it that same person every time. So when that's not possible, which is quite often the case, invest in some printer or with your signage company, and have some of that point of sale across templated, so you get a consistent approach all the way through. And again, when you're inside the store, make use of your space, make use of available space to reinforce the brand, reinforce the shop that they're in. So here you can see a bit of Simply Fresh branding on a vertical column. There's our messages of "We love food, eat well, feel well," which is something that we want to promote to customers. And you can see that again, the product is allowed to talk on the shelf, and also with the way it's been illuminated, which I'll go on to too. And again, I sort of mentioned before about this rational and emotional approach, but equally, I've also spoken in the past about a 5D retail experience, and this is appealing to all five senses. So these are the things that your customer goes through when they walk through your store, and any one of these things can either make them take the leap and shop with you and purchase the kind of products that you're trying to sell to them, but equally, any one of these things can turn them away too. So all the touch points through all the senses need to be considered. So taste is something that will come. The guys will buy product from your store, and that'll be a lasting impression. And hearing is something that quite often is disregarded. And I walk into a lot of independent stores, not just independent, but also multiple stores where there's not something that is playing in the background, for example, like a radio or some music. And actually, the noises that you are considering can be quite off-putting. And I'll run through the rest of these as we go through. But essentially, when I speak about smells, most of our stores, most independent stores these days will bake in stores. They'll bake product. So there's a great story to be told with that smell, right? There's nothing like the smell of fresh bread. So bring that closer to your store, bring it to the front of your store, and let customers experience it. And I talked about radio and overhead music. We typically work in small environments, 1,000 square foot, or sometimes less, sometimes more, and noises can be amplified. So staff have to communicate with each other, and the last thing you want your customers experiencing are staff shouting from one end of the shop to the other. You don't want them to experience trolleys banging against shelving and loud product being dumped onto the floor. So take their hearing away from that, deflect it, and give them something to listen to. So some background music, some maybe promotional messaging over that as well, which is always very useful. And these all reinforce the kind of environment and experience that you're trying to give to your customers, which always goes back to your brand identity. And then I touched on how we like products in our stores as well, and what that means. So this is another part of the journey into your store. I'm sure anyone who's had their store designed and had a shop fitter come into their store and talk about lighting has mentioned these Kelvin ratings, and we know, what does it actually mean, right? So there's essentially there's two forms of lighting. There's task lighting, there's accent lighting in a retail sense, and that task lighting is that 5,000 number, and that accent lighting is that 2,700 number. And the way you use these products and the way you use this lighting in your store is to develop the kind of narrative that you want your customers to follow. So the journey that you want them to have, you want them to speed up in certain areas and you want them to slow down in others. And you're trying to interrupt the autopilot. So when you've got something that you really want them to stop and look at, maybe touch, maybe experience, then absolutely soften the lighting, warm it up, and bring it into a place where they feel more comfortable. And equally, where you want them to experience a more clear and fast transaction, maybe like by till points, etc., then brighten the store up. And lastly, on this particular element of reinforcing your message, I think there's nothing in independent retailers that I have seen over my years that's more important than the human touch and the service element. So where we separate ourselves in this industry, in grocery retailing from all others, is our personal touch. And this story that I'm encouraging you to tell from a branding perspective is all about you. All about you, the independent retailer, because it's your story that the customer wants to experience. They want to know why you're there. They want to know why you're doing certain things. And they want to know that you believe in what you are asking them to believe in. There's no better way to reinforce that message through yourself and your staff being the embodiment of your brand identity. So I spoke about uniforms earlier, but it's not just about that. It's about the personality. It's about having a passion for what you do. It's about having the approachability for customers to talk to you and to understand what you're doing there, what your purpose is in the store, and also to ask for extending your message that you have from the outside of your store and the identity that you're looking to create, but extend it, bridge the gap. Don't always wait for the customer to inquire, but maybe you help them. Excuse me, is that something that you're looking to purchase? Do you know much about this particular product? I do. How do you get that message across? And then try to explain that you are a specialist maybe in a certain category. But it's not just about specialisms, it's also just about friendliness, and it's about community and neighborhood. And that's what independent convenience stores typically stand for. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about design practices when it comes to laying out stores and things that can be a bit more generic in approach. So they're not specifically for Simply Fresh stores, but also just for all independent convenience stores and what's important. And on the right, you can see a sort of transition zone, but on the left, just typical C-store, a couple of runs of aisles of shelving, chillers around the side, counter by the door, etc. Sort of typical store. But I want to bring your attention to the all-important transitional zone, right? A lot of independent stores, neighborhood stores, or whether they're high street stores, come straight off the street. So that, and they could have varying degree of neighbors. So there could be fast food outlets next to them. There could be high boutique fashion next to them. You just don't know, right? We find ourselves in all different environments. But what we do know is that the customer's on a very different journey before they come into your store. So in order for you to allow them to experience the brand that you have created in your store and the story that you're trying to tell, you have to let them take a breath. You have to let them acclimatize to your environment. And this transitional zone is all important. So for me, when you walk into a store, there should be a little bit of space, right? This kind of negative space with nothing in it essentially allows a customer to just adjust to the pace of the experience they're about to have in the store. And I think From experience in our stores, we've absolutely benefited from allowing customers to not be bombarded with instant messaging right at the front door, but to allow them to grow into the store with you. And once they've acclimatized, then it's about you reinforcing your message. So not straight away, but let them come into the store and then let them acclimatize. So that our message is always about fresh, right? So whatever your message may be, whether it's about fresh, whether it's about high promotion products, whether it's stacking products in big displays, etc. This is your time to reinforce your message and encourage customers to go on this journey with you. So this is the setup of what they're about to experience. So typically I like to put nice abundant fruit and veg displays filled with, and then backed up with chillers that also have fruit and veg and produce going into chilled food. And that encourages our customers to start to adopt this mentality of cooking from scratch, hand-on tactile experience. They can pick up this loose product and they can see that actually there's care that's being taken in display. So there's a trust that's being built on the back of this. Once you've got them in and you've got them past this time, then it's start to look at how you can encourage their dwell time. We know that an increase in dwell time results in an increase in spend. So how do you do that? So bringing attraction further into your store is a great way of bringing people in. So that could be a deli counter, that could be a specialist area, say a free from food or vegan dietary specific food, but bringing them into this particular area and making them slow down. And once you've got them there, then you pull them around into the rest of the shop, right? So that's a chance for you to start to tell your story in depth, exactly what you're about. So, we like to have tactile versions of retail. So whether it's e-cover, where you can dispense, and you can dispense your sort of bulk dispensing, or you can even dispense wine and stuff. So we like to bring this into an area where you slow down, you know what we're about. We've told you the story that we're telling. We've begun that story with you, and you started to adopt it, and you started to shop in the way that we want you to shop in the store. And this is about the migration of customers in your store, slowing them down to the pace that you want them to be at. So I like to talk about the 3 C's as well a lot, and then this sort of reinforces those messages around that journey. So we look to captivate at the first part. So I spoke about setting the tone. So it's Simply Fresh, about fruit and veg. In other stores, it's about a celebration of great BWS areas. So again, the labeling on these things, making people pick things up and touch them. And on occasion, it's about bakery, and it's about fresh food to go as well. So the smells and the presentation of that. So captivate your audience at that earliest opportunity. Then celebrate what you're good at, right? So at Simply Fresh, we think we're good at fresh, so we talk about that. But equally, we're also talking about dietary specific and alternative products in our stores. So we've always had a quite wide array of whole foods, and now we do bulk dispensing in our stores as well. So celebrate the product that you want your customers to know you for, right? So this is where you can really stamp your USP in the customer's mind. And also break the autopilot. These fixtures can be really quite interesting. It allows you to put your personality and your identity into your store, and these are areas that you can really have great success with. And then also collaborate, right? So the weakness in independence is that you're by yourself. The strength in independence is that you're nimble and you're flexible, and you're there. You're in your environment. You can talk to your customers, right? But equally, there's a strength to be had with your partners. So, Simply Fresh, in partnership with Sainsbury's, is now reinforcing that message with customers and using the strength of another brand, a nationally and globally recognized brand, that also reinforces the key message at Simply Fresh store, that this is your neighborhood store. You have availability, you have your products where you want it, and you have a wide array. So you're now piggybacking off the back of another brand, but collaboration within your environment is very important. So whoever you choose to work with, utilizing the brand strength of another is really, really important. And as we've seen through the industry, that's happened with food to go. It's happened with coffee, with Costa and Starbucks, for example. Globally recognized brands that you can use, and you can encourage customers to win confidence with the fact that they are actually in your store too. And then continue to collaborate, but maybe in smaller fashions where you're not an expert, where you are particularly confident in delivering something, then collaborate with another. So I'm always talking about innovation in convenience, but equally execution always trumps innovation. So if you're not entirely confident, but you have something that you want to deliver to your customers, then collaborate. So whether it's detergents with Ecova, whether it's wines with Borough Wines, whether it's telling customers more around sort of having a wider appeal that you do free tap water by working with Refill, engage others and collaborate, bring multiple brands together and celebrate them in your neighborhood store, and really have a sense of the collective. And that sort of brings me to an end. And so I think there's quite a few different messages through there, but the most important for me would be to have truth through consistency through your branding. So from the front all the way to the back, through the people, through the products, and bringing you all and telling the story in its entirety, and then allowing your customers to read that story with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Devinder. That was really, really good. I'd like to welcome to the panel now Scott Graham, owner of McLeish of Inverurie, and Jason Miller, who is Client Director at EKW Group, who are also kindly sponsoring this event. Before I get to asking them some questions, I just want to remind you that you guys can ask questions as well. If there's a box just underneath the screen, if you type the questions in there, then they'll come through to me here. So feel free to send questions through as we go along. Devinder, first of all, your 5-step plan really showed how much detail goes into planning a store. On average, and I know it's probably a difficult question, but how long does it take to finalize a store from kind of concept to opening?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. I think ultimately a lot of this depends on whether you're starting a new store from scratch or whether you've got some existing data to work with. And it does come back to the data, because we try and build stores based on customer, based on demographics. So if there's research from existing sales, then you can then shape what the store should stock. Merchandising then will shape the rest of the store, how many chillers you need, what shelving you need, etc. But typically, in sort of in its shortest form, I guess it's around about a 4 to 6 week development phase, and then you start to plan that store in.
Thank you. And Scott, coming to you now, you've just done refurbish your store. A couple of things. First of all, what led you to decide to make those changes, and also what changes did you make in store?
Okay, yeah. So we refitted the 20th of July. I suppose the main thing, last major refit in store was probably about 10 years ago, and although we've made changes over those years, they've more been add-ons rather than a complete overhaul and complete change. We really started the process from outside the store, so we wanted to make the store really pop out. We're a street location, so it was important to us that the store really popped out. We wanted to maintain our kind of heritage aspect to our business. So we actually took on a marketing company, gave our ideas across. These ideas had been basically taken from visiting other retailers, going across to Ireland, seeing what the guys are doing over there, speaking to some of the guys at Simply Fresh, just really taking and sharing experiences with colleagues, really. So that was the main thing. It allowed us to introduce new concepts. It allowed us to kind of tidy up merchandising, whereas we'd possibly added new things to the business, but more just kind of pushed them in rather than actually merchandised them properly and integrated them properly into the business. And one of the main things was margin. So for many, many years, convenience stores have worked in this 20% margin, and unfortunately, it's just not achievable in this current day and age. We really needed to be up closer to the 30% margin, and so we looked at concepts, ideas, we looked at our product mix, we looked at going with a lot more local suppliers and using their expertise. And also the customers' habits have changed over the years. So we had to look at how the customers shopped our existing store. Should we, what learnings can we take from speaking to our customers, watching how they shop our store, So there was a number of aspects of why we done it, and yeah, it's kind of all came together. We're 8 weeks in. We're still learning about the refit. I think after 3 weeks of the refit, we actually done another mini refit, just taking the learnings from it. So yeah, 8 weeks in, really happy with the results, but still very much in the learning process just now.
Yeah, I can imagine it. And also doing it at quite a difficult time with the pandemic restrictions and everything changing constantly. That must have been quite a headache for you.
Yeah, well, the refit was planned in for kind of January time. That kind of moved to March, and then, of course, we locked down. So really, as we came out of lockdown, it was trying to get those plans back in place as soon as we could. Obviously, for shop fitters getting back to works, for getting materials, etc. So, yeah, interesting time, but also a good time because there was a big focus on convenience stores at that time. So it was really good to highlight the store at that time.
Fantastic. And Jason, our local shop report shows that convenience stores have invested 585 million in their businesses, mainly on refrigeration, internal building and maintenance. Is that something you've seen reflected in the businesses that you look after at EKW?
Thanks, Sarah. Dav, that was really useful, so appreciate that. Thank you. I'd say over the last few years, there's been an increase year on year. More retailers have been innovative and replanning the stores. A lot of the clients that we deal with are involved in a lot of growth through acquisition of stores. So we see that more from them going into a new store and giving it a makeover. So we do see that as well. So that's obviously in part. For established sites, I think there's been a lot of change and expansion, extending the ranges, looking to promote high margin products, things like the chilled food to go sections and putting them at the forefront of the stores. But I actually think that we'll see a bigger jump in the next shop report from what I've seen. Speaking to a client only this week, and they find that because of the summer months and the COVID situation, it has brought an upturn in a lot of sales for convenience retailers, and they've had a little bit of excess cash, and some have decided to invest that in a lot of equipment. So I think we'll see an upturn again in the next report.
Oh, that would be interesting. We'll remember that, and we'll quiz you again at this time next year when we have the next report out. We've had a question from the audience. It sounds weird calling it an audience, from the people at home. And I'll go to you, Dav, first, and then pick up with Scott. How do you balance innovation, look and feel, with the cost of a shop fit for an independent? So, I mean, I'll get Dav, Scott, either one of you want to take it first, but.
Yeah, I'll go first. I mean, it's a good question, because ultimately, and I mentioned this in sort of the presentation, I think that we are in the business to sell products to make money, right? And we don't sort of shirk that responsibility for independent retailers, but equally we are in the business of creating a narrative and a story, and creating equity in a brand and trust in a brand. And so both those things go hand in hand, in my opinion. But there's no point innovating if you're not able to execute it properly. And part of execution is delivering on the intent. And the intent is to increase sales or increase the buy into your brand. So I think you judge your return of investment on how you, you set your parameters and you work to those. But it's really interesting what Scott mentioned as well in regards to doing refit and then doing a mini refit. Almost sort of hand in hand, and it's because you are continually evaluating the proposition, and you are flexing and you're moving and you're being nimble depending on how your customers react to stuff. So the balance, I think, it's almost a 50-50, but the intent needs to be the same for both, right? You need to be thinking about why you're doing things, and the message should be longevity. So we don't want to do flash in the pan if you're going to spend lots of money on stuff. So you want it to build incremental sales. So data, a response to customer need, then innovate in that particular department, and I think you'll get results.
Scott, you agree?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a great question. It's one of those, you will have retailers out there who have the finances to go and spend 200, 250k in a store. you'll have other ones that don't have that level. So, for example, I didn't change my floor. I didn't change my ceiling. However, I chose to invest in new refrigeration. I chose to buy new shelving. Nothing wrong with my old shelving, but actually allowed me to get in an additional aisle, which gave me X amount of additional footage for an X amount of additional products. So I think that as long as you're comfortable that you will get a return on that spend, and that's where it comes into the planning and looking at the data and getting ideas for colleagues, etc. If you're happy, then that is where you need to spend that money. Would you get extra sales if I put in a new floor? Possibly not. Possibly yes. It depends on the state of your current floor, I suppose. But
Definitely.
yeah, I think retailers know their stores best. They can take experiences from other retailers, but at the end of the day, you've got to be able to justify that you can get the return.
Absolutely. And Dav, you mentioned about in your brand outside as well, and having the link with Sainsbury's and showing that as to your customers. Scott, you are, and as McLeish Binvereri, you're independent. Why did you decide to? I think it's historical, but did you ever decide not to move away from that? Was there ever a consideration of moving to being, under a symbol, or were you more than happy to stay with the history of the brand?
There was definitely consideration, without a shadow of a doubt. I think pre-COVID, everyone can clearly see that retail was difficult. Without a doubt, you need a partner, whether you call that a symbol partner or a wholesale partner. You definitely need a partner just now. We looked at it, we weighed up the options. A big focus on us is heritage, it's local suppliers, supporting local. We're in a market town. The brand, we've had it, we've been running it under McLeish for 11 years. It's well known in the area. And actually, when we sat back and looked at it, for example, somebody saying putting an ISA or a Spar or a Costco, whoever above the door, would that add 4 or 5k onto my weekly sales? No was the answer. That nobody could come and say, well, we would generate it from this, and this. So we choose to have a supply partner, which is basically trying to take the benefits of a symbol without the fascia above our front door.
Sure. That's great. And Jason, just putting a consumer hat on for a moment, are you persuaded by brands? I mean, slightly different because obviously Scott is in a smaller place, but would you be happy going into an independent? Is quality more important to you than the brand, or would you choose a brand over somebody that maybe just had Johnson stores across the top?
Both, I'd say. I mean, a lot of consumers like myself would probably prefer, more likely to enter shops that they've heard of. And brands, as Dav said in the VT, the look of the store is important for capturing that customer initially, but then the quality in the store will earn the repeat business. So in terms of brand and symbol groups, myself, I've obviously been naive in the past because I'm not brand aware or symbol group aware since working in retail and working with the ACS. So I've limited myself in the past. Whereas now, if I see a store that I've heard of through the ACS and I see one when I'm out and about, I want to go in and go and have a look and see what the store's all about. I will say, I mean, I work across retail and franchise sectors within my role, and I think it's quite important for the retailer themselves to protect that brand that they work for, especially for the big group. So if I was to shop in a store and don't have a good customer experience, I'm less likely to use a similar store under the same brand, and vice versa. Have a positive experience, and I'm more likely to reshop in that store. So it's important for that retailer to protect the brand that they're working for.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you. As someone who wears headphones completely when I'm shopping in small stores or big stores, your comment about music I thought was really interesting. And there's a study that says if you play French music next to red wine, it will increase your wine sales. Have any of you come across that or tried anything in a similar vein to try and encourage sales by using more subliminal messaging, I suppose? Dav?
So yeah, Sarah. I mean, I look the word that you just used there is the key bit on the research, right? Subliminal. I mean, I think what you're referring to is something that was done sort of in the late '90s, and retailer played French music and also German music at different times and different of the week, and they found sales were up in French and German wines, according to music. But the most interesting part of it was that when they canvassed the customers for for research afterwards, not one of them could say, "Oh, I recall listening to that music." It was just subliminal. They heard it was there, and they, they didn't know that they heard French music, but they certainly bought French wine. And there's been other research done on tempo in music, and that's something that we have toyed with at Simply Fresh. Is what does the tempo look like, right? So we know that fast music encourages less impulse, right? So this is the kind of data that comes from these things, and equally, I think the music, whether the music's recognizable or whether it's sort of abstract, that has an impact as well, right? So does elevator music work good in retail stores? It's a question. Does classical music work well? And does it slow the pace down? And again, there's some data to suggest that it does. So, we are toying with a new version of Simply Fresh radio in stores, trialing with it at the moment. It does have some overlay of interesting promotional collateral too, which I think is really useful. But it's not just the customers, and I think just add this one last thing, not just the customers, and touching on what Jason said about retailers and having responsibility to the brand, etc. It's also about welfare of the staff, right? These guys sometimes work 8-10 hour shifts, it can get really boring, at times. Customers provide interest, but sometimes it's not as interesting as you'd want it to be. So, welfare and good for the mind, having a little bit of good music playing in the background, I think is important.
Apart from maybe at Christmas when most retailers want to kill themselves because the music's so awful and they've heard White Christmas 17,000 times. Scott, what about you? Have you ever tried anything? Do you have music in your store?
Yeah, we haven't tried anything subliminal like that. We tend to use a local radio station. I think based on our clientele, it's really good to have the local travel on in the morning for the white van man going through. It plays a modern mix of music, so when you've got a high volume of school kids coming through, it's kind of modern music that attaches to them. Yeah, I'm not saying it wouldn't work. The good thing about the in-store radio is obviously you get that promotional activity through it. Yeah. So that's definitely it's hugely beneficial if it's done properly. But not something we've experienced with.
That's subliminal as well, because if somebody mentions a brand, you do, even if you didn't hear the rest of the ad, you definitely would hear that, and that makes you want to, could make you want to go and buy that product. So yeah, absolutely. Dav, you mentioned about the importance of a transitional zone at the beginning of the store. How has that changed with the COVID restrictions, and have you had to kind of move it and adapt it?
Yeah, so adapting certainly, but I think the transitional zone has been a real winner actually with COVID, because it allowed retailers in our estate to have a natural space to win confidence with customers that the right actions were in place to protect and safeguard them. So, whether it was sanitizing stations, whether it was clean down baskets, etc., and the messaging, that transition took place in confidence then. So when they walked into the store, they were able to stop and say, right, these guys have looked at my welfare, the staff welfare. I have confidence, I'll continue to shop. So I think it was just as important as ever. And equally, what the transitional zones and not just transitional zones, but negative spaces in store, winning space back, not continually packing the rafters, as it were, it allowed more modularity. And with a pandemic that nobody expected, certainly having a flexible floor plate was a winner, right? So having a little bit of space where you can shift and move things into and be, in this case, reactive was really important.
I guess the transitional zone is great if your store's on the larger size, but it's probably slightly more difficult to do in a store that's maybe as because Scott in the size that Scott's is, or even in some of our independents that are under 1,000 square foot.
I mean, I'll let Scott touch on his own store, but just an example of a store of the size of Scott's. You know, we have stores that are 1,000 square foot, 1,100 square foot, and they, like you said, they quite rightfully push back when I say to them, right, I want you to create a space at the front of your shop, right? But the time doesn't have to begin when you walk into the store. It can begin just outside the store too. So, you know, we've had stores that have put planters outside. We've had stores that have tailored the messaging, and whether it's A boards or whether, you know, around the entrance to the store. So then what you do is you transition the customer's mission there, right? They may have just come out of any environment. You don't know who your neighbours are, but they could have come out of any environment before, beyond a particular different mission, and you things that you transition them into your store, whether that's in or out. But you have the space to do it in both, I believe.
And I guess that's what you've done, Scott, with making you said earlier you wanted to make the store pop a bit more in the high street. So that's exactly what you've done with yours, is it?
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think just the space element, you know, one thing with being the main feedback that's come from 90% of customers is how more open and bigger the store actually looks. So I think you can be quite clever design-wise and graphic-wise just to make and give that feeling of space. And I think one of the learnings we did have during COVID as well was our store previously was a bit tight for mums with buggies and all these, you know, disabled access. You know, we invested in a new shop frontage, and the main reason for that was actually to put in a bigger entrance. You know, that was one of the key reasons for changing it, was actually to make a bigger entrance into the store, just to make that experience work from the minute you cross the door.
Fantastic. Now, we're running out of time for this session, so I'm just going to ask you just a final question for each of you. If you had one tip for someone looking to either refurbish, rebrand, or like completely open a new store, what would that tip be? And obviously, I realise that Jason's going to come out and tip from a slightly different angle than Davinder and Scott. But can I start with you, Scott? What would you say was your kind of your piece of advice for somebody doing something new in store?
For me, I get my biggest learnings out of going seeing other retailers, speaking to other guys. These guys are your colleagues. In some cases, they're your friends. Yeah, they may be in a completely different area of, you know, where you trade, but actually it's going in, taking an idea, taking a concept, and then actually turn it to fit around your store. So for me, with 100% is to get out there, get out your store, and see what else is happening out there.
Fantastic, and which is what we used to do a lot of study tours, and now we're still trying to do them online. But yeah, and there's nothing stopping people going out in their cars and visiting other people, exactly, apart from restrictions in certain areas. I don't want to get into the rules of where people can go. Dav, sorry, over to you. What would your advice be?
Well, I certainly echo what Scott said there. It makes a big difference to go and see what other retailers do. But I would just probably maybe broaden that a little as well. I'd encourage retailers to look outside of food retailing and grocery retailing. Every retail environment faces challenges. You know, whether it's fashion, you know, whether, you know, even the selling of books and the small bookstores, everything. There's innovation to be found in every different guise of retail, and I think that you can learn from these guys, and you can bring little tips and bring them into your own business. And those things provide an element of surprise as well. So I think there's learnings to be had from the whole of the sector. You know, we've asked before when it comes to how do you increase your food to go and coffee sales in the store. Well, you know, maybe take some learning from other hospitality venues and see how they do it, and then bring that into the retail environment. So yeah, I think you can broaden that a little.
Thank you. And Jason, any words of wisdom?
Yes. Measure it. Make small changes. Measure it. See if it's worked. Make further changes. All retailers that I've spoke to, and I've heard on panels that all retailers have made mistakes with trying to make changes and not paying off. So make small changes, measure it, and go from there.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Davinder, Scott, and Jason. I really appreciate your time and being part of our panel, and hopefully the guys watching have gained a lot out of it. We're now going to go to a break, and then we're going to start again at 3 o'clock with how to tailor your retailer offer like Cost Cutter. But these guys will be back for the networking session at 3:45. So if you want to come and ask them questions in a meeting, we'll be doing that at 3:45 and networking with the rest of the guys who've been on the call. So thank you very much, everybody. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for today's second ACS Summit Masterclass session, this time all about how to tailor your retail offer. Here we're looking at the topic absolutely fundamental to retail, ranging and category management, but also taking a wider look at the role of product, customer, competition in this area. We'll also discuss approaches to investments, trends in the market, and a wider look ahead to the future. So plenty to cover in the next 45 minutes. Kicks off, I'm about to hand over to Jamie Davidson, Business Development Director of Costcutter, who will treat us to a short but no doubt thought-provoking presentation about how Costcutter are supporting retailers to really differentiate the retail offers and bring out the best from local shops, and that will go into the Shopper First programme as well. Then move straight into a panel session where Jamie will be joined by Dave Hiscott, the longest retailer from Dorset and the Year Award winner, Rav Garcher, another independent retailer running 5 stores in the Greater West Mids area, and Louise Etherden, grocery experts at Location Planning and Retail Experts, CACI. In that panel, we'll delve a little deeper into the place of data and how to truly understand local customers and those not yet in our local shop. Yeah, just a quick thank you to CACI, our sponsors, who are working with more and more retailers in this space. But without further ado, I'll hand over to Jamie.
So good afternoon. My name is Jamie Davison, and I'm the Business Development Director at Costcutter Supermarkets Group, and I specifically look after all the new business joining the organisation. Today, I'm delighted I'm going to talk to you about the how to tailor your retail offer like we are at Costcutter. So a little bit about our business. We're a symbol group operation working with retail partners throughout the United Kingdom. Our clear mission is to help independent retailers thrive. We have independent retailers, we have corporates like Compass and Sodexo, and we also have a retail division of stores that we operate and own ourselves. So what we like to think makes us a little bit different is that we purely do not want a wholesale partnership. We do not want a transactional relationship. We are about a personal relationship with our retailer partners, and now in turn we're pushing really hard to extend that from the retailers through to their shoppers, as we believe this focus is the key to unlocking future growth for them as retailers, for us as their partner, and equally for our supplier partners as well. So transforming the shopper experience, putting the shopper needs first is number one. Really putting the shopper's requirements at the heart of all the decisions that we are making. By then, we can then deliver the right offer and the right range to meet those needs. But finally, underpinning all of this, and you'll have heard it over the last week, month, and then even the last 6 months where we've had these online videos with retailers, our work is never done. So listening to shoppers, listening to our colleagues on the shop floor, listening to suppliers and insight providers is absolutely essential, because we must keep evaluating the performance of our stores. And equally, we must also be agile and ready to deal with what comes at us from a social aspect as well. So today I'm going to talk about the Shopper First Drive 5 to Thrive programme that has been a core to the Costcutter turnaround. Before I get on to that into detail, I just want to talk a little bit about the Shopper First journey. So this starts off for us with the account manager talking to the retail partner about their joint business plan, their JBP, because we recognise that every retailer is on a different stage of their retail lifeline and their life stage. So what do we mean by that? Well, we've got retailers that are happy with one store, are looking to develop that store, but equally we've got retailers looking for more stores. We've got retailers negotiating on their leases. We've got retailers wanting to sell their businesses. So from our perspective, it's really important that we align on what is really important, what's the scale of the Shopper First project, and also what will the investment be, if there is to be one. Because this is not about spending hundreds of thousands of pounds. There are many aspects, as we will go through over the next 5 or 10 minutes. Secondly, really important is to really understand how is the business performing today. Getting the understanding of what is great, what do we need to keep doing, what is not there, what do we need to introduce, and equally some honesty, what do we need to stop doing in these stores. So we complete a detailed SWOT of the business. And then, and very important to that is actually the retail environment, the curb appeal, the look and feel. Thirdly is clarity on the trade zone. So really understanding what is my catchment. And when you look at it, on average, a C-store attracts about 10% of their catchment. So how do we grow that proportion of the pie? How do we get more of the trade that is in that zone? And equally, let's really look at who is the competition and who is complementing the offer that the retailers have got. But actually, they need to really define as well, what is their purpose? Are they a full food store? Is it a C-store? Is it a top-up distress store? But let's really understand, what are we trying to be? Fourth is working on the demographic understanding. And why this is so important is the Shopper First program is not about just getting more from the shoppers that you've already got. This is about actually really understanding, why is a large proportion of my trade zone not coming to the store? Why are we not peeling? Why are we not relevant to those shoppers? And what can we do to change their perception of the business? And then finally, when we've been through all of those points, we get to the commitment and the commencement of the overall initiative. And that's when we bring in the wider Costco Supermarkets Group team to support the overall initiative. So Shopper First, Drive 5 to Thrive. These are the 5 pillars that sit underneath it: insight, brand, store and space, range, and then finally, operational excellence. Now today, I'm going to focus most of the energy and efforts onto the insights. Then I'm going to talk about the brand, and then I will touch on finally store, range, and excellence. So a big core element of the Shopper First program is the insights and the dashboards that we are producing for all of our retailers. And powering that is our association and our collaborative approach with CACI, HIM, and Nielsen, who have been fantastic throughout the projects with regards to really understanding the demographic clustering and also the insights and the latest trends. So what we've also done is that we've completed a real deep understanding and research and interviews with shoppers, individual panel sessions, group sessions, to really understand what is important to different types of demographics and different age groups as well. So what we did was we then created 5 shopper personas: busy impulsers, young tonighters, habitual browsers, and dynamic later lifers, and then finally striving shoppers. What we then do is we've produced a dashboard for every single Costco Group retailer, and it highlights the 2 dominant shopper personas for their trading location. Equally, we then bolt on as well, what are the things that the retailers need to be thinking about seasonally, and we update this a number of times throughout the year. We then bring this to life in store, and we socialize with the retailer, most importantly, again, with the store teams as well. They are the people that engage with the retail, with the shoppers all the time. So from our point of view, taking them on the journey is equally a key part of the initiative. Brand is the second pillar. And from our perspective, as it says here, this is all about helping retailers grow by building their reputation locally. This is about making their stores be far more of a destination, a place where people want to go. And from Costco Group's point of view, the tie-up now with Co-op and NICER, this is absolutely essential to this. Because what it's done, as you've heard from previous presentations and sessions like this, the importance today of a really strong and compelling own brand is vitally important. And with our tie-up with the Co-op, we have now got an own brand offering that enables our retailers to trade toe-to-toe with the multiple grocers in the convenience sector. And most importantly is the credibility that this has now given Costco to retailers as being true fresh food retailers.
So for me, having a cost cutter literally where I can walk down the road and get fresh produce means that every day I can choose what I want to eat, and it's healthy and it's quick, and you can't get more convenient than I can walk down the road and not have to go to the other supermarkets.
Now that I know that the fresh range is here and it's quite wide, I will certainly be buying from that range. Looking ahead, I don't have to travel far to come and buy healthy products because I can get that here.
I've always liked Co-op, and again it's another one that kind of caters for non-meat eating kind of clientele, so yeah, for me it's been perfect.
So I can buy them every day coming here, as you know, instead of keeping them in the fridge.
If I couldn't eat healthy by coming here, then I wouldn't come here.
And then looking at the three other final very important pillars. And I could talk in length about each of these, however, we haven't the time today. So first and foremost, store and space, looking at the environment, looking at the curb appeal of the store. Is it inviting? Is it a store where people want to go to? We look at the equipment as well for the suitability. Does it need modernising? But also we look at the perception and do we meet these shopper needs? On entry, are we really giving the shoppers what they want straight away? So vitally important is the space allocation. And then let's not forget as well the promotional impact. Value remains key within our stores. Moving into range, and then there's three very important areas. Number one is the core, the branded range of products. Two, that most important own brand, the Co-op range. And then finally, a local and DTS range that really adds something different and over and above the core and the own brand. And then finally, looking at those additional services that we can offer the shoppers to really meet their needs. And then lastly, but absolutely imperative to all of this, is how do we drive consistency? How do we really use technology? How do we look at the store processes to drive on-store availability? Let's not disappoint the shoppers. Training and customer service is vitally important as well, to drive that overall experience that when the shopper leaves, they absolutely want to come back. So, how are we measuring success with Shopper First? First and foremost, especially where there is investment going into the project, we're looking for a sales uplift of 20%. Secondly, behaviours, and this is not the behaviour of the shopper, this is the behaviour of our retailer partners, moving away from product and price and promotions to actually really thinking more about the shopper, the offer and the experience. And then finally, the shoppers themselves. So how do we drive those additional shoppers into the stores that previously we were not relevant to? How do we delight and surprise them? And how do we keep not only meeting, but exceeding their expectations? So now I'd just like to finally leave you with two examples, one from an existing retailer and one from a new store that we just launched last week. So first of all, Mike Nichols from Cost Cutter in Dringhouses, just outside of York. You can see here, Busy Impulses is the dominant shopper persona. Now this store at 1,300 square feet is not a big site. And we've known the site for many, many years as Mike's father traded the site before him and was actually a Mace retailer. Very much a CTN stroke news agent that sold alcohol as well. That was really what the local shoppers saw the site as. But when we started the Shopper First review of the site, we really had the ambition to drive the performance. Now this store has got competition. 3/4 of a mile on one side is a big Tesco Extra and half a mile the other way is a Lidl. So we really looked at it and first and foremost we said we wanted to change the brand. We changed the Cost Cutter, we opened up the windows, and from Mike's point of view, absolutely got on board with our blueprints and our design principles, grouping all the food to go together, the alcohol together. But these are not the things that you see when you first move into the store, because we want this to be a fresh food store, even though we're 1,300 square feet. So you walk in on fresh produce, meal for tonight, meal solutions, and protein. We've totally changed the offer. Mike's a really big supporter of Co-op own label, and those sales have just gone from strength to strength. And again, all the way through, Mike was really, really keen to take his team on every step of the journey. So his team really got on board and helped sell in the benefits of the improved store. Delighted to say sales are up over 40%. And this for a 1,300 square foot unit is now taking in excess of £30,000 a week of groceries. Services are on top. Secondly is a new store. Now this is Peter Patel from the Zola Group. This is Peter's 4th store I'm going to talk about. His previous 3, of which this is one at Brockley, have all been through the Shopper First programme. Now, this was a really interesting site. So the store is in Southborough, near Tunbridge Wells, just south of the M25. And we've got a real mixed demographic. The primary demographic is busy impulsors. However, tied for joint second is young tonighters and striving shoppers. However, what we've really looked at when we get into the detail of the report is that there is also an element of executive wealth in this area. Again, from a competition point of view, 300 yards to one side of the site is another symbol operator, and 0.2 of a mile along London Road is also a multiple convenience store operator in an express format. So what we did was we had a lot to think about when we launched this site. We opened the store on the 22nd of September. On the softest of launches, we had 40 people queuing up and ready to come into this exciting new store. On entry, you walk straight onto fresh promotions. And then immediately on aisle 1, you can see there a really compelling fish and protein offer. This is a food store and we wanted to shout about it immediately. Chill runs along aisle 1, and then you can see it's complemented by a really strong produce, with Co-op own label really having that presence on dips, produce and dressings. We have purposely set this store up. We want it to be where the local shoppers can come and complete a full shop. And equally, you know, we have utilised direct to stores to complement the core and the own brand. Weighing your own, cook, you know, and again, more direct to store suppliers are really giving that extra over and above experience to the store. But again, all the favourites are there as well. So if you want food for now, coffee, hot food, ice cream, milkshakes, slush, and a really compelling sandwich meal deal, it's all there as well. But it is absolutely not what you see first in line when you come into the store. This is in the middle of the site, as this is a food store. And again, the range with electronic SELs throughout from a tech point of view, you know, really delivering a first-class shopper experience. And then finally, to really add to that meal for tonight focus, a really quality beers, wines and spirits offer to finish off the overall range of the site. And then finally, as you make your way to the checkout, again, something that Peter and the team are focusing really hard on, making sure the shopper feels valued and welcomed, and all the time the team will be asking for, how can we improve? So again, finally, I would like to say thank you for listening today. If you really want to see how Costco are tailoring their stores today, go down to London Road, go to the store yourself, talk to the team. They'd be delighted to see you in there. And I'd just like to personally thank you for listening today. I hope you found it enjoyable, and I look forward to the next panel session. Thank you.
Thank you for a really excellent presentation there, Jamie. Something just to kick us off, which really stood out to me, is how you talk about retailers needing to understand their local catchment. And whether it's, you know, striving shoppers or busy impulsors, do you often see a bit of a divergence in shopper profiles and difference, or any surprising results sometimes? Work in retailers.
So first and foremost, I'd say, you know, this is not some form of witchcraft. This is just a really structured approach to helping our retailers understand where are they trading, what do people think of their business, and how do we actually meet the needs. So what it's really helping us do is slow down the whole process and really help our retailers, who are really busy people. You know, they've got more and more every week that ticks by, they're taking on more responsibilities themselves. But we just want them to really help shine a light on, you know, their own business and that catchment. So yes, there are often surprises, and also we've got to factor in stores that are transient, where people are moving through locations as well. But it's just a really important step in the store development process.
So it's great also to have Dave and Rav here, some top retailers with us today, and interested in your views on the presentation as well, of course. And also, you know, when you're looking to review your ranges in store, what is it you're trying to achieve there? Is it about traffic and footfall, or turf, or transactions? How do you approach that sort of process?
Yeah, so first and foremost, I'd say, you know, this is not some form of witchcraft. This is just a really structured approach to helping our retailers, who are really busy people. You know, they've got more and more every week that ticks by, they're taking on more responsibilities themselves. But we just want them to really help shine a light on, you know, their own business and that catchment. So yes, there are often surprises, and also we've got to factor in stores that are transient, where people are moving through locations as well. But it's just a really important step in the store development process.
So it's great also to have Dave and Rav here, some top retailers with us today, and interested in your views on the presentation as well, of course.
Well, if I start, I mean, obviously the most, without sounding crass or anything, is to improve the business and improve profits. That's what we're all here for. But equally, as I said, it's about trying to change customer habits, drive footfall, drive traffic. Absolutely.
I think for many retailers and us alike over the years, it all comes down to the first impression and the location. Usually, it's the first sense you get when you arrive at a location. If it's easier if that store is already trading, a lot harder if you're developing a store from a shell. So you've kind of got to get a sense of if you been in retail for a while, and it's a more of a gut feeling. And then it's just asking a lot of opinions, asking your network for their opinions, their ideas, their gut feelings, and then tailoring those feelings into something that kind of works for the community there, while taking a sense of what they might be used to, where they're going. The hardest thing of all to do is to break habits, and that's the challenge. Everything we do is to break a habit, whether that be to nick trade from a competitor, or it's to change the customer's habit of eating, what the kind of stuff they're eating. Maybe it's more processed, maybe it's more tinned, maybe it's not enough alcohol. So we're trying to break habits, and that's our job, is to shoehorn everything into a small box that customer needs in their fridge, their cupboard. So we're going from one box to another box.
Yeah, and that gut feeling you mentioned as well is something that, independents especially have always been able to, typically know their communities very well and get a sense of what may be needed that isn't there, and find those service gaps as well, particularly as we're seeing during the coronavirus lockdown months earlier in the year as well. If I could come to you, Louise, I know CACI have done work to highlight the rise of sort of consumer-driven retail, but also the need to go towards being insight-centric when you approach ranging. Could you tell us a bit more what you mean about that?
Yeah, so I think a lot of that's about, so obviously there's more and more data out there to sort of help people make decisions, but it's about using that data to sort of interpret what it means and what it means for your store, and to use that to make good decisions about the location. So a lot of what we do tends to focus on a combination of understanding the consumers and how consumers are changing and their needs are changing and what they want. And then there's the understanding the location and the function that location is serving, and what that means to sort of people in their day-to-day lives. So partly how it sits in a sort of competitive framework, but also just, what are people doing here? Are they here because it's near their work? Are they here because they're passing through? Are they here because they're residential and they're near home? And when you put it all in context, what does that mean that sort of retailers should be thinking about with those stores? I think you always need to tie it with a bit of that, the kind of the judgment, the on the ground, the feel. It doesn't replace that. It just adds depth or other ideas, I guess, into the mix, and a bit of, a sort of a sense of what it looks like could be possible beyond what's been done before.
Yeah, and I suppose, building on that, one for the whole panel as well. We all know, our customers are diversifying what they want. People no longer necessarily buy on price alone, but also, have a session of branding before, environmental credentials, other things there too, and more different diets becoming more mainstream as well. Because of the vast range of customers with their different wants we're catering for, is it becoming more complex to meet the needs of the entire community? Is there a need to specialise, or is it easy to bring in that one-stop shop for everyone?
I'll take it. I think, going back to what I was presenting earlier, the answers are there, but it's how we communicate. And also what we're really pushing our retailers is to be really clear on that purpose. don't try and be everything to everybody. Try and understand where is your part in the area, and actually then really be really focused on that area and become famous for that area. But again, you know, from my point of view, it really is about, you know, taking your store team on the journey, constantly engaging the consumers, the shoppers, and actually continually assessing, am I still relevant? Am I still giving the shoppers what they're really looking for?
Yeah, and I think it's all about that understanding that the function, the purpose, the why are people most likely to be there, and what's the centre of gravity, rather than just trying to cover every possibility. It's focusing in on one main thing you're going to do really well, and if you've got the space, then you might be able to weave in a couple of other bits too. But just focus on what the centre of the essence of what you can offer the area looks like.
I think it feeds back to the essence of independent retailing, and it fundamentally is taking risks. And we are there to take those risks, however big or small they may be. For example, we introduced a small 1 meter range of Eastern European foods. We didn't know where these Eastern European people were coming from once we introduced the range. Before that, these were faces I'd never seen. And it's almost as if there's one person found out, they told two found out, they told four, and it steamrolled. And now we've got that range not within a 1 meter bay, but across the whole store. Equally, in one store, I found out that we had one of the largest outside of London Filipino communities, and they just needed 3 or 4 lines. It was jasmine rice, some vegetables, and a few of the soy sauce, oyster sauce, those sorts of things. And those were not lines that I was geared for or expected to get in. And if I did, there'd be a really high price, like paying near £2 for coconut milk rather, because it was a branded option rather than an imported option. Now we're at 89p, and that's taking a big risk, finding out what works, finding out what prices they want to pay, and then finding the solution. But coming back to your earlier point, it's actually easier. It's easier to bring those lines in. There's more suppliers out there. You just gotta uncover them. I didn't realize that supplier that would give me the ranges that I needed for that Filipino community was 5 minutes from where I live. All right, 40 minutes from where I'm trading from, but 5 minutes from where I live. And it's just, once you start asking the questions, you'll be surprised at the answers.
That's a really good example there, Rav. And you know, you touch on how we engage with customers. Any pointers from the panel on how to go about that for other retailers? Looking to things like social media as well and other ways of engaging. They tie into this too.
I think it's a hard one, but it's everything. Do all the social medias, spend time on the shop floor, get your face mask on. It's everything. You've got to be everywhere, and you've got to be listening everywhere.
And I think the thing, Brav, to back it up then as well is when you get the shoppers into the store, you've got to delight them. You've got to meet and exceed their expectations, because that credibility, your reputation, that will also be translated throughout the community. And like where you were saying, Rav, about one told, another told another, it's no difference at all with stores, and especially new stores or stores that have just had refits and are trying to attract new shoppers in. That solid, strong reputation is vitally important.
Yeah, and absolutely. And as Rav said, getting on all of the social media is so important, but actually utilising the younger staff as well, to the Instagram generation and the Snapchats and all the rest of it. And because I say, I'm very much Facebook generation. I get Facebook, but I've got younger staff who will interact on Instagram for me and make everything much more relevant to that generation as well. So just make sure we're getting the breadth of what's available to us.
And moving back towards something you raised in your presentation, Jamie, about a real emphasis on healthy produce and healthy ranging. Are there any common difficulties, Rav, Dave, you may have used on bringing healthy ranges into store? Is that now a necessity for the local neighbourhood shop to go from a limited offer to a trusted offer there, or does that not always work in all sorts of stores there?
I think it's possible. It's not the easiest to do, but it's baby steps, and it starts with you take say the top 5 salad items or top 5 veg items, and you just slowly increase, and that might mean that you may not choose your preferred supplier, because that will be a full case of, I don't know, aubergines, for example, but you've got to go out to your nearest supermarket, pick a couple of aubergines up, start selling them, waste a few. So you start small, and you slowly grow it, and that might mean that you beg and borrow from other stores. You buy at retail, you sell at retail. You got to buy that customer in. In many cases, you sell at cost price, just to build that customer. But fundamentally, things like fresh starts with the protein. Get the protein right, the rest of the basket comes with it. And it's often the case that we talk about basket, and that's what it all comes down to. As much as we want to stay away from just doing the basket and selling everything at cost, it takes time. And once you've established that habit, you can then build your margin back in at a later date. But it doesn't all come at once.
Yeah. Just had a comment come in as well, saying, sales are vanity, profit is sanity when you're looking at range and space. And I wonder if that resonates here as well. And that's a difficult balance to find sometimes as well.
And they also say cash is king. So actually, you've got to make sure you're actually getting the margin from the right sales.
Absolutely, yeah.
But as Rab did allude to as well, was we do need to build waste in, and we need to accept that. I mean, we spend tens of thousands of pounds on store refits and making our stores look absolutely amazing, but sometimes we get put off by losing £15 on a particular line, and a bit of perseverance and actual investment into waste to create sales and to actually give a consistent offering as well is obviously quite important.
Yeah, that's the bit about changing the habits. I'm going to say, that you need to go on the journey to change those behavioural habits to get yourself known as a destination for whatever the sort of function that you've chosen that you're trying to serve looks like.
I think just going back as well, Steve, in fairness to the point about knowing your purpose, because not every single store is going to be fresh food focused. So it's not to every store in the land and saying you've got to lead on fresh. There will be a lot of stores that will lead on food to go or impulse. So again, I just want it to be really balanced, but all centres back into know and be really clear with what you're trying to be, and then be really brilliant at it. So fresh food isn't everywhere in every store, but it's certainly in a lot.
It's an excellent point to make as well, I think, shared by a lot of people. And I suppose, we talk about the inevitability of waste when you're innovating in these things. But also something we haven't quite touched on yet is the role of services. So obviously we, grocery offer, but things like post office, ATMs, bill payments, the variety of services offered in convenience stores only seems to be diversifying. How does that fit into this and getting people into store?
Yeah, and I think interestingly, with especially now as people are changing their behaviours and often not wanting to travel as far and to go to as many locations, I think the importance of those services and being able to do more things in a certain place or in one place is becoming kind of more important than before. So think about the right services to be offering, and coming back to that, it all comes back to that purpose. What is the purpose of the store that you're trying to sort of build, and what are the right services to fit into that to make it a destination?
Excellent. And also, Jamie, you spoke about own label, so how Cost Cutter is paired up, with Cobb, and we're seeing that in Cost Cutter and nice stores there as well. Is that something, is own label more important than ever now in terms of providing a solid range, or how does that link in with your everyday and premium brands across different things there?
So I think it absolutely helps provide the confidence in the offer. But I think it's got a part to play. You know, when you look at the three key elements I was talking about earlier, the brand is still vitally important, but then backed up by a really strong own label and own brand is really, really essential as well, because a lot of consumers today, certainly when we're looking at the Co-op range, they actually see it as a brand in its own right. They're not seeing it as like an own label that is inferior quality. They're actually expecting still the same quality and depth of range. And then over and above that, though, you do need the ranges that complement the store over and above the local products, the direct-to-store products, because you're trying to give an overall exciting experience when the shopper comes in. So own brand is really important, but it plays a part within the overall range.
I think I'd just echo that. But in some cases, the brand isn't necessarily the premium. There are brands that are out there that are value brands, and you just got to, depending on your location, depending on your what you're trying to achieve margin-wise, you'll chop and change according to what meets the customer needs. Like I said about the coconut milk, we've got branded, we've got own label, but in reality, the people that want to buy it are the ones that are making authentic food that need an authentic flavor. So it's an imported product, which funnily enough makes it cheaper than all the others.
But that's getting close to your shopper though, Rav, isn't it? And actually understanding truly what they're looking for and what are the really important ingredients that you really need to stock to meet their needs.
Yeah, like you say, it's understanding the motivators, the drivers, that deeper catchment and consumer understanding of what do the people really want and what do they want at this point in time in the shop that I'm going to.
Yeah, and I suppose, you know, looking at the brands and within wider ranges within store as well, you know, interested to get views on the role of suppliers here. So when you're doing range reviews or whatever it may be, what sort of relationships does a retailer want with their suppliers and how to input into that process? Any best practice out there anyone could share?
I think it's really difficult for suppliers to work with retailers. In some cases, the depth of range within the category is too wide. Some are preferred, some are experts in different areas. Then it comes down to symbol group and how they communicate. They've got their own preferred suppliers. And then we're living in COVID. How does somebody come out and help you with your range, especially when we've tailored the range quite locally, so that we may not have a preferred nicer range or a preferred cost cutter range or a preferred your symbol group range. We've gone more local, and then the supplier comes in and says, yeah, that's not what fits into what we would recommend. Actually, you're not really here seeing my customers. You've not looked at the data. So how do I trust that what you're going to tell me is accurate? And again, often the answer is we've got data from across the country. I'm like, well, I've got one store in this area, and this may not represent the country. So I find it's difficult for them just as much as it's difficult for us retailers to trust. And so there's kind of a hurdle there that needs to be overcome. I'm not sure how either.
It's almost taking a whole picture of what the national outlook is, and then looking at again going back to so Jamie's video and his points on knowing your customer and understanding whether an impulsive store. We've got 5 stores. Town centre store is massively impulsive, very food to go orientated, and one of our neighbourhood stores, which is a mile down the road, is much more community based and much more food led. So, as I said, it's very much understanding your own store, taking the national advice, taking your own from your own knowledge, looking at the shop floor, talking to your customers, talking to your staff, and putting everything together and coming out of a range in that sense as well, and just constantly challenging yourself as well. What was right 6 months ago isn't necessarily going to be right now.
I think just on that, I think that the symbol partners can help on that as well. I mean, we're using a third-party company now that are pooling all our EPOS data, and then we're going to feed that into sort of the shopper personas to try and cluster stores that are similar. And then we're actually looking at the transactional data and comparing store to store. So then if your account manager can come in and see you and actually say, we've seen that you're not selling this range of product, it becomes a bit more relevant for a discussion of actually, okay, that's really interesting. So rather than the big high level insight from suppliers, to actually go into the data of similar types of stores could be really thought provoking.
Absolutely. We've done that almost on a micro level as well between our 5 stores. I create a database that binds all that together and highlights what one store's doing well on, and we're not necessarily stopping another. But yeah, absolutely. That's yeah.
We've done quite a lot of work along those lines as well, with people sort of looking to understand, like you say, you then can identify individual stores that look like they should be selling a slightly different mix or could be doing something different. But then also sometimes you see a pocket of stores where it's sort of like, hang on a minute, there's something completely new that we could be doing with these. So you sort of can think about, you know, okay, let's try something very, very different here, because we can see that there's a demographic need, and sort of what's currently being sold there is maybe not quite what it could be. Spurs new ideas.
But I think the question needs to go back to suppliers, is to work, you know, they probably already are, is to work with the retailer and create a plan of what happened for 13 weeks, execute range, then evaluate 13 weeks, but not with one retailer. You've got to do that with 10, 15 at the same time, so that you've got proper statistics to work upon. But have from the outset, do exactly what Costco have done, and Jamie, where you've got to box it in, you've got to put it in different boxes. You've got to have a store within a certain area with a certain type of customer, and so there's, say, 4 stores trialing it in that way. You've got, you know, another group of customers in another location, high street or whatever it might be, and you've got 4 trials in that location, and then you evaluate. All too often I'm seeing across the board testing being done, and it's all the same. And I'm often in that meeting saying, this ain't right. You can't do that. That doesn't work. Which is destined to failure if that's the idea. You've got to have a different test based on the environment that you're in.
Yeah,
it comes quite nicely back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of, you know, using the data to build on the insights and the insight driven there, but also that, you know, there is a need to just test things sometimes and see what lands, see what works as well. That may work in one area, but not 300 yards up the road, for example. But I suppose, you know, in heading towards a summary, it'd be useful. We've spoken about tailoring range and retail offer, and of course, retail's changing faster than ever. We see online retailers opening up high street stores, for example, supermarkets leasing excess space. I've even seen car dealerships opening up in shopping centres, for example. But it'd be useful to get from each of you what you see as the biggest challenge on developing a convenience retail offer that's really tailored in this environment, and any advice for how to take that forward as well. I head to Jamie first, if that's okay.
I think it's an exciting time to develop a shop, because I think if you look at the options that retailers have got now, and the depth and the wealth of insight and information, so I'd go into it with confidence. I wouldn't move too far away though from making sure you've got the appropriate funding. I mean, Rav's opened a number of sites in the past, and, you know, making sure you structure it appropriately and always leave money for liquid cash, keep the store going, to invest in waste. So to make sure that really you're structured, you know what you're doing, you've got your plan, you've got the right investment levels and cash to still keep it going. And then really sweat your partner, sweat your simple partner or your wholesale partner, because they've got to be with you absolutely from the start to really help you through the initial 3 to 6 months. And then just finally, as we've sort of banged the drum today, keep talking to your shoppers and get your store teams talking as well, and take them on the journey, because you can spend a fortune on setting up a store, but it's your colleagues that engage the shoppers every day, and they need to go on the journey with you about what sort of store you really want to be.
So I think echo exactly what Jamie just said. The only difference I'd add to that is it's all about location and it's all about timing. We quite clearly, the last 6 months have been uncertain, and the next 6 months are just as uncertain. And we don't know what the economic outlook looks like in terms of whether how far of a recession and bounce back we may be in. That may make a massive difference on funding, and it also makes a difference on how people are going to be using stores accordingly. The last 6 months has taught us that we've all picked up extra sales, and many people I'm talking to are all sitting on 20% extra turnover post lockdown and into this new sort of semi-lockdown world. So that's confidence. Everyone's looking at what to add in to stores with this extra cash, but all with one eye on Christmas, and that's uncertain in itself on how we execute Christmas. Do we put that 20% all in stock? Do we put that 20% in all stock for now because there's toilet roll that's going out in supermarkets, and our trade hasn't really been fluctuated in the last couple of weeks or so. So maybe they're getting hit first, and then we'll get hit second. But by the time it gets to us, it'll be maybe in toilet roll and pasta. We don't know. It's these uncertainties that are certain. Is the known unknown.
What certain is uncertainty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But having said that, just to put a spanner in the works on everything we've been talking about today, I'm often think back about the iPhone. Nobody was asked whether they wanted an iPhone, yet we've all got an iPhone or a phone equivalent to an iPhone in your pocket. So there's an element of gut and knowing what the future needs and providing that for your location. And you come back to location, get your location right.
Yeah.
And
build understanding that.
Let's hope.
It's understanding that location. And like you said, I think there's a huge piece around understanding. I think people were changing anyway with their shopping behaviours and their shopping habits. But it never more so than over the last 6 months. What people need from a store has utterly changed. And like you say, we're still on the roller coaster of what that change is going to look like. And I think where we end up longer term is probably going to be a bit different to where we were before this all started. So just the way people work is fundamentally changing, which, like you say, kind of there are new possibilities, I think, with how stores can sort of serve people who might be working from home a lot more, or sort of just the way people shop, the way people sort of what they value has changed as well. And I think with the sort of recession and economic implications coming in too, that's going to change even more. So yeah, staying close to that. Like I said, a lot of it comes back to that understanding your customer and understanding what customers need and want at that point in time in that location. And that is a shifting thing, which, and being creative, I think, as well with, I think this last 6 months has shown some really creative solutions that people have come up with. Not strictly convenience, but there was, in a way it is, there was, one of our local pubs was sort of breaking down catering packs and selling it in small packs as a click and collect service from the car park. That's one example. Delivery services coming from stores, whatever it might be. But I think, the world is changing, which does offer opportunities if you understand the customer, understand the location, and think of things that you can do with it.
I think that's an important point there to sort of end on there about the opportunities right out of this as well. I suppose a few key takeaways. Jamie, you mentioned 10% of locals use their local shop. It's quite compelling when you look at how much larger and how many more customers there are to potentially reach out there by taking a radically local approach on tailoring. There's been a lot of talk about the mentality of focusing on the customer more than the product in some cases, and also the need to sort of keep up investment, you know, in the background there as well, and continually look for opportunities for where the range can be changed. But you know, I'd like to sort of bring this to a close now. We've got networking sessions coming up now, so there should be links that on the buttons at the bottom of the page if you're watching this. So if you click on them below, you'll have the chance to network for both this session and the first session at 2 o'clock. So if you click on them, we'll see you shortly. But I'd just like to thank CACI for sponsoring this session. Thank our panelists, Jamie, Dave, Rab, and of course, Louise. And thank all those watching as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all.